Hello, this is DC Hammer and welcome to the DC Hammer Show. So let's get right into the news. So from the Daily Signal today with a headline that the deadline is looming. Can China-US, US-China trade deal get done? So as you know, President Trump and President Xi and representatives thereof have been meeting together for several months in order to iron out the unfair trade relationship that exists between the Red Dragon, as I call Communist China, and the United States as decades-long initiatives by the Red Dragon in order to take us down, for them to dominate the world and destroy everything in their path, has continued to the point until President Trump was elected and took office in January of 2017. And at that point in time, for the first time, China started to hear the word no. No, this isn't going to continue. Yes, I know that you were bribing every American president / politician you get your paws on, that you were doing anything to steal our intellectual property, that you were playing unfairly on all playing fields, playing with anything you could get your paws on in order to take us down, but it's not going to continue anymore. So Xi, although on this photo from the Daily Signal, has a little bit of his typical wry, you don't know whether that's a smile, a smirk, or he's getting ready to pull that strange-looking knife out of his back pocket and stick you with it. But that's kind of the Chinese way, the Communist Chinese way of doing everything. So just be advised that the trade negotiations are going on. Peter Navarro and Lighthizer on behalf of the United States are continuing to push things in the right direction in order to try to somewhat level the playing field. And the tariffs are still in place, ranging from 10% to 25% on $250 billion worth of goods that America buys from China, and a paltry $110 billion worth of goods that the Chinese actually buy from us, and the tariffs in that case start out at 5% to 25%. So that seems fair. So we start out at a threshold twice as high as the Chinese, and they sell us 2.5 times as many things. So that sounds fair. However, President Trump remains optimistic in his dealings with Emperor Xi and trying to work out a deal, but there is a deadline looming. March 2nd is the day. President Trump has indicated that March 2 is kind of a flexible thing, but they're hoping to get as much as they can done before that. If they can't, then shiver me timbers and batten the hatches, boys. It could be additional tariffs up to and including billions of dollars in goods, and it would affect billions of dollars that American companies have invested in China. Probably a good time for those companies to bring those jobs home to the United States. What do you think? So there has been significant movement made in the talks, according to Robert Lighthizer, our trade rep. And the main goal here is to not only level the playing field, but to show the world that we are not going to be manipulated by the Red Dragon and taken advantage of, and allow our political leaders to be bribed, manipulated, whatever word you want to use. The people like Bill and Hillary Clinton, Dinosaur Dianne Feinstein, those days are pretty much over. At least they will be over as long as President Trump is in office. So let's see how this works. Of course, pushback against what President Trump is doing, the Red Dragon wants to make sure that the world understands that nothing we are doing politically has any effect on them at all. Because if there's a chink in their armor, if the dragon loses one of its scales, if there's any weakness shown on all by the Communist Chinese, their fear is then that will be a stone thrown in a pond. The ripple effect will create this weakness worldwide in their continuing venture to dominate the world and to dictate communist policy from Beijing, just like what's happening in the Brussels for the EU. So buckle up, the markets will respond whichever way this goes, and we'll see what happens. And coming to us from ChinaNews.net, once again, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is on a road trip. He's been over to Europe. He was in Hungary the other day, and now he's in Slovakia. He had great talks with the leader of Hungary, Viktor Orban, and now he is meeting with the leaders of Slovakia, and Pompeo is pledging according to this China News story, support to curb both Russia, and I know we still got the Russia thing and this completely out-of-the-world fantasy that President Trump is colluding or has colluded with Putin. Nothing could be further from the truth, but don't let that stop the left from whatever fantasies they want to leave today. So Pompeo is pledging additional support to Slovakia and other European countries in order to push back against both Russia and China. Secretary Pompeo stressed that we, the American people, we are back, we are engaged, and we are actually acting as if we are the leader of the world and not the follower of the least nations that ever were. Pompeo went on to indicate that we are reasserting our recommitment to that area to ensure that the Russian aggression that's happened in the past and is taking place right now is mitigated. And that this One Belt, One Road initiative, that's the tentacles of the red dragon, the red octopus that are headed up towards Europe, are chopped off or handcuffed, or other action is taken in order to reverse the trend of dominating not only the Asian countries, to taking down the United States from within by our leftists, the Democrats that have been in power all these years, but also then to push back against the movement into Europe. Secretary Pompeo went on to stress the relationship, the needs to support NATO as NATO continues to be threatened by Russia. Russia tries to break NATO into pieces. It's not going to happen, especially with Trump in control and with Pompeo, Secretary Pompeo, continuing to solidify our ties with these nations in Europe, the NATO members. It's just not going to happen. So even as the communist Chinese, the Red Dragon, is lashing out, especially when we take positive action against their emissaries abroad, conducting illegal and illicit activity abroad, including Huawei, one of the giant technology firms. And naturally they say it's groundless what they're doing. When we catch their people spying, when we are able to determine that they're communist Chinese run companies that are supposed to be free market capitalist in nature as far as how they're operating abroad, are actually just one more wing of the espionage front for the communist Chinese. So we'll see how this goes. Zero Hedge indicates that the United States and the European Union are slapping new sanctions on Russia. So on top of what Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is doing right now in Europe to push back against the brown bear, to make sure that Russian interference in what's going on in Europe and the potential for military aggression from the Russians to be used in order to achieve its aims in that part of the world, we are taking other strong action and in actually dealing with the European Union in a way to craft new agreements in order to levy new sanctions against Russia and punish Moscow for the aggression that it's been taking in the Ukraine and the Kerch Strait. And if you didn't understand what that meant, the Kerch Strait, Russia has jailed 2 Ukrainian sailors, again this is from Zero Hedge, involved in a confrontation that took place between Russian and Ukrainian ships in the Kerch Strait. Here's a picture of the valiant Russian military forces with their captives, with their Ukrainian captives, and here it is. So the Kerch Strait is on the east side of the Ukraine, and Ukrainian vessels were impounded in the port of Kerch, and this is between, again, the Crimean area and Russia, Crimea on the west and Russia on the east, and this is in the area between the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea. So Ukrainian ships were passing from the Black Sea to the Sea of Azov, and Russia used a cargo ship to block passage under the bridge arch in order to prevent that ship, the Ukrainian ship, from moving freely through that passage. And that created a confrontation. There was bumping of ships, and the Russian bear took it upon itself to grab 2 sailors off of one of the boats in question, the Ukrainian vessel, and is continuing to do things that are inflammatory in order to puff itself up and to make sure that everybody knows not to do anything the Russian bear doesn't like. And so Ukraine has declared martial law. They voted to impose that for 30 days after the Russian forces fired on those Ukrainian ships and grabbed 23, almost 24 sailors in the Black Sea. So this is interesting. You're not going to hear this on the Marxist Screaming Media because, again, Russia and the United States are obviously completely working together, and Trump and Putin are off playing golf together somewhere. Nothing could be further from the truth, but don't let that scare the left into owning up to reality. It's pretty much impossible at this point. And this comes to us from the New American. The leader of France, I guess you can call him the leader, Macron, is considering a referendum to end the Yellow Vest protests. So, as there is this pushback against Emmanuel Macron and the other weasels that are unrunning or disrunning or destroying the countries in Europe, the locals, the people, the nationalist patriots, who would prefer for their countries not to be destroyed through unlimited illegal invasion forces coming from the Middle East and North Africa, from the imposition of constraints upon their economies, from decision-making that takes place in Brussels, Belgium, through Mr. Juncker, the head of the EU, and dictated then down to the countries such as France, Spain, Germany, and so on. And the French have decided that's not a good thing, and they have started protests. The protests, again, you will not see this in the Marxist Screaming Media. There are thousands and thousands of people in France, now in Spain, before that in Germany, taking to the streets and saying that too much is too much. They want their country back. They want the deep state out. They want the EU out. They want to be able to make decisions at the local level. All politics used to be local, according to some people in the United States. Not anymore, I guess. All politics now, according to people like Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama et al., are supposed to be global. But it looks like there's a big pushback against that now and continuing in France. So in order to keep his little behind in the president's chair in France, Emmanuel Macron now apparently is backing off a little bit, and he's trying to get his approval rating back up into, I don't know, since it's been down under 20% for the last couple months, maybe into the low 20s so he can really be viewed as a populist leader. And so he is now considering a referendum to actually talk about what the people want. Can you believe this? So there's town hall meetings, there's groups of citizens talking about taxation and other issues, and so for the first time in Emmanuel Macron's illustrious reign, we've actually got him for the first time listening to the people. Can you believe it? And as Jean-Philippe Desrosiers, a law professor and constitutional expert, has put it, you go for double or quits to try to get out of a crisis, at the risk of being plunged into an even deeper crisis. So, Professor Desrosiers is indicating that Macron, even though he's worked himself into a very tough spot, may have to take some positive, definitive action in order to save himself from a fate even worse than low ratings. And the French have a history of dealing with leaders at certain points when they become upset and maybe they aren't getting enough crumbs of the cake if they can't find the bread. And when it gets to that point, we know what could be facing a leader that just doesn't listen to the people. We'll see if the French have changed their ways over all these centuries. But don't let that stop Emmanuel Macron and his like from being ardent climate change alarmists, because absolutely the most important thing on the planet right now is that we take action in the few countries that are actually already have pollution control issues in place, such as the United States and a few countries in Europe, but at the same time that we clamp down on the free societies of the world, we will allow the communist Chinese, the Red Dragon, in places like India, that even though it's a democracy, they are a polluter, for the big polluters, China and India, to run unfettered in what they do to the environment, but as the smaller and already more progressive ecology-oriented countries of the world like the United States continue to be under pressure to completely destroy their own economies in order to achieve the unachievable, zero emissions and so on. The Red Chinese, the Red Dragon, and India and other polluting countries in the world just run wild. Why in the world don't the people that believe that the most important thing in the world is climate change and ecology, why don't they move to the places where they could do the most good and make a difference in places like communist China and India? I just don't understand. So the referendum could take place as early as May 26. French citizens will be able to go to the polls, vote for a delegation to the European Parliament, and voice their concerns for the first time in recent French history. So, vive la France! And as One American News Network tells us, that over across the pond, across that narrow strait between France and England, the UK, and that's UK's May, as in Theresa May, deep state overlord of that little island, may seek more time to find a Brexit deal, as she's telling that to lawmakers, and telling them, and this is a good one, I love some of these expressions that come over from that side of the pond, hold your nerve. I know people that have a lot of nerve. I know people that are supposed to hold their water, but I didn't know about holding your nerve, so I guess this is telling them to, as my dad used to say, relax. So, Prime Minister Theresa May yesterday told lawmakers that they need to keep their powder dry, how's that one, instead of hold their nerve, over Brexit, and give her more time. She has not had enough time. That's what it is. She just hasn't had enough time to deal, to negotiate an acceptable deal to both the European Union and the British Parliament. That's it. It's just, you gotta give her time. The lady needs more time. Give the lady more time. So as the United Kingdom is on the course to leave the EU on March 29 without a deal, then she's trying, once again, one more backstop in order to come up with some kind of a plan to, if she could, totally derail Brexit. And number two, if she can't derail it, then do Brexit in such a way that it's as if there wasn't Brexit. In other words, she may allow the nation that has voted, the public has voted in order to leave the EU, she may allow them to leave the EU as long as it's like they never left. That would be acceptable to her. So, Theresa May is under pressure not only from the citizens of once Great Britain, but also the opposition party leader, Jeremy Corbyn, socialist, but don't let this sentence fool you. But Jeremy Corbyn is accusing Theresa May of running down the clock with sham negotiations to pressure Parliament into backing her deal. She wouldn't do anything like that, would she? You be the judge. And of course, there's leaders saying that there's actually goodwill on both sides. I haven't seen any goodwill on the side of the people opposing Brexit, but let's just take that as it comes. They're over there. I'm not. So maybe they're right. So British lawmakers threw down the gauntlet a month ago, rejecting Theresa May's no-deal deal at that point, and now it's going to be interesting to see how the different parties in play come to some kind of understanding in order to move the ball forward. And they'll talk about enhancing workers' rights, protecting workers' rights, and so on. But the bottom line is, this is the shadow government overlords, the deep state puppet masters, trying to continue to allow the central banks to run everything and for countries to become enslaved to initiatives that drive globalism. Well, it seems that there are people around the world, not only in the United States and the UK, but also on the other side of the pond, as we just talked about over in France, Germany, and Spain, that may have a different opinion. So this may play out in a different way, in a way significantly different from how the deep state wants it to go. So anyway, Theresa May said she didn't have enough time. She tried to get things sorted out before Christmas. She thought she brought a great deal back. Of course, what she would consider a great deal isn't a deal at all. And now there's an issue with the clock running down. So pray for the United Kingdom, the once great Britain, and we'll see how this one unfolds. This comes to us from the Epoch Times. Over here on this side of the pond, here in America, Mexican drug trafficker Joaquin Guzman Lara El Chapo Guzman has been not only arrested, taken to court, tried in the Southern District of New York. He has now been found guilty of multiple charges, meaning as in all counts of what he was indicted for. which was the aftermath of running his criminal empire as he took over from Escobar, wiped out. And so the Brooklyn grand jury found Guzman, former head of the Sinaloa cartel, convicted him on all counts. And hang on to what the accounts are. Here they come. Of course, there's Mrs. Chapo shopping. The trial has gone on for many months. And it's interesting. There may be a lot of information that's been spilling out during this trial. It appears that El Chapo, to save himself, has been dropping names and hints. And although a lot of this has been unreported by the Marxist screaming media, a lot of what may have been shared with prosecutors, or maybe to the prosecutors through his defense attorneys, may actually enable American prosecutors to take action for some of the deep state cabal members over here that maybe El Chapo either dealt with directly or maybe had some dealings through third parties. It could be interesting as we see other indictments unsealed. So here you go. El Chapo convicted of all 10 charges, engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise. I can think of somebody else where these charges sometime in the future might be read out in pretty much the same way against her. Oh, wait a minute. No, she's running for president again. No, I'll take that back. Let's see. Engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise. International cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, marijuana manufacture, distribution conspiracy. Cocaine importation conspiracy. Cocaine distribution conspiracy. This is the new coke. So then we've got the international distribution of cocaine. And there were 4 charges for that. Then use of firearms, conspiracy to launder narcotic proceeds. Guilty times 10. So El Chapo, I hope that you lobbied a little bit for a reduced sentence by squawking a little bit about some of the people with whom your cartel may have been doing business over these past years and decades, but we'll see. This comes to us from Grabby News. President Trump last night held a rally in El Paso, Texas. And at that time, when he was having his rally before probably 35,000 folks, only the building accommodated 8,000 where President Trump was. The fire marshals did some kind of a variance in order to allow President Trump to cram another 2,000 into the building. So there were 10,000 in attendance in El Paso to hear President Trump. Outside, there was another 25,000 folks. Even in the cold and inclement weather, they were out there watching their big screen TVs as President Trump spoke. And before that, though, there was a rally, I guess you could call it a rally, being held by Beto O'Rourke in the same area. By all reports, he had an astronomical 200 to 300 people in attendance. So President Trump took this occasion to kind of poke the Beto in the eye a little bit, and why not? So President Trump thanked the fire department for doing the variance and getting in that 10,000 folks. And if you did listen to his rally, it was another barn burner. Senator Ted Cruz was there, and Senator Ted Cruz delivered an outstanding speech himself. So we're in good hands down in Texas with Ted Cruz, and President Trump was down there to see the progress on the building of a new section of wall and to confirm to all of his supporters that one way or another the wall is going to be built. But you wouldn't believe that if you were to listen to some of the other headlines, such as this headline coming to us from Breitbart, that Donald Trump is not happy with the quote-unquote bipartisan border security deal. Another one of those undeal deals. So the spineless Republicans have met with the nefarious Democrats, and finally, after they decide to get together, the premise for ending the shutdown was an agreement between President Trump and Nancy Pelosi that as soon as the government workers were put back to work, that Nancy Pelosi would then enter into substantive discussions with the Trump administration through the Republicans in Congress in order to create a bipartisan solution that would include funding for the border wall. At least that would have been on the table. As soon as President Trump allowed the government workers to go back to work, the government was reopened, she immediately reneged on that and said, no way, nothing for the border security, nothing for the border wall. Typical Lucy move. Charlie Brown, in this case, though, is a little more savvy. He didn't follow through with his attempted kick as she pulled the football away for him to flip in the air and land on his back. That did not happen. I think President Trump has a football of his own, and he's going to kick it without her holding it. So President Trump said he's not impressed by the border security quote-unquote deal reached by quote-unquote bipartisan members of Congress, and did not say whether he'd sign it or not. It looks to me like the strategy in place right now is, I think, President Trump over the next couple days. The deadline for coming up with a deal is this Friday. We are talking about Friday this week. The money runs out again. The 15th is the end. And if there's no deal reached, then the government would shut down again. I believe that what President Trump is doing here is he's going to squeeze every drop that he can out of this with his spineless negotiators on part of the Republican side and his nefarious, demonic representatives on the Democrat side. He is going to try to get the best deal that these morons can come up with together. And then he's going to go from there and do what he wants to do anyway without shutting down the government. So I think he's going to try to pull it off, number one, without shutting down the government again. Number two, without having to declare a national emergency. But one way or another, if they only fork up, as this compromise bill is saying, only less than $1.5 billion funding that would only cover around 55 miles of the physical border, and these capping off of detention levels for ICE, so Immigration and Customs Enforcement will be limited in the number of people that they can incarcerate, and that would mean the people already incarcerated, if they take new people into custody, they'd have to release people already in custody, the criminals, the rapists, the murderers, the buddies, the future voters of the Democrat Party. They'd have to release them into the general population in the United States in order to make room for new arrestees, or stop arresting anybody, which is probably the more likely scenario that the Democrats think they can get out of this. But we'll see if they succeed with this or not. So although President Trump indicated that he is happy that the parties are making some kind of progress, it's obvious that the progress is not what you would call progress. They're inching in a way that they think that they can box President Trump into signing something that's completely unacceptable, but something that they want. Completely one-sided deal, as always, by the Democrats. The only way they play the game. Negotiations to them is, you give us everything we want, we won't give you anything, and that's fair. Sign on the bottom line. Well, President Trump is not playing that game, and we'll see how he's using his 3D chess against them playing checkers, and all of the checker pieces are the same color. We'll see how he gets himself through this in a way, and I believe it still will happen, that we end up with the border wall, fence, whatever you want to call it, being built, border security happening, ICE continuing to do their job, but at the same time then keep the government open and then set the stage for further improvements down the road. Yet first there was KFC, and now there's AOC. So once again, this is according to the Geller report, Pamela Geller, that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, her Green New Deal, as President Trump put it last night in his rally in El Paso, Texas, quote-unquote, sounds like a high school term paper that got a low mark. Kind of like the marks that Al Gore got when he took natural sciences at Harvard from his guru who used to work at the Scripps Institute and then wrote this book that was supposed to set the stage for the end of the world and the climate catastrophe that we're quote-unquote involved in, global warming, which then became climate change. Same kind of unscholarly work by people that know nothing about what they're doing. And there she is in all her glory. I hope she's getting ready to take a bite out of an apple. Move the kids. And so yes, when morons are elected, we end up with moronic things. And as the Geller report indicates, that this giant Trojan horse of a confused mass of socialist and communist initiatives, all wrapped up in a pretty ecology bow, is falling on its face, and everyone looking at it realizes it's number one, non-doable. Number two, it's no way on the planet can anybody survive through the implementation of what she says can be done. Number three, the economic damage that would be done to this country would never be able to be reversed. And through the whole thing, regardless of what she do with this giant Green New Deal, once again, China and India, the two biggest polluters on the planet, would be completely free to do whatever they want to continue to bring the world environment down, while we then pound ourselves into the dirt to achieve unachievable goals. And of course, there are some questions that remain unanswered by elements of the Green New Deal indicating that all airplanes need to be replaced by trains. And how do you exactly, as Trump asked, how do you take a train to Europe? But since several of the 2020 Democrat hopefuls to become the next president of the United States are already embracing this proposal, reality is to Democrats as kryptonite is to Superman. NBC News is reporting that the Senate has uncovered no direct evidence of conspiracy between Trump campaign and Russia. Now, isn't it interesting? All of a sudden collusion goes away and then it's conspiracy. But at the same time, the conclusion that's come out now from the Senate, after 2 years of this nonsense, is there's absolutely no connection between the charges. Because again, this is projection. The day after the election, when it was obvious that Hillary had lost and all of her devout followers were screaming to the heavens for help. Help that did not come their way, because they're screaming the wrong direction. If they're trying to get direction, they should have been screaming at the demons below, not the God above. But anyway, as the Hillary supporters were realizing that they had lost, Hillary had already created her insurance policy, the Obama acolytes, the followers of the deep state, the shadow government overlords that we have to continue to fight out, had already created their new strategy was to project collusion or conspiracy between Trump and Russia, which would then cover for what was really going on, corruption between two other parties. But let's go through this first, and then maybe there's some enlightening news revelations that have come out regarding that second thought. So after 200 interviews, thousands of pages of documents, all of this wringing of hands and crying to the moon to save the Democrats' bacon, the report is coming out that that Senate committee has been able to find absolutely nothing to tie Trump to Russia. And even though Mark Warner, the minority representative on this committee, is deeply involved in his nefarious connections to Russia, coming events, I believe, we were supposed to continue to believe that the Mueller investigation must go on, what they are doing in order to find out what has really happened, continue as they continue to bury what has really happened and try to blame, through projection, Donald Trump for everything that the Democrats have been doing for many decades. And at least one lawyer says that maybe even U1 Bob Mueller, when the American Inquisition winds down, won't even issue a report. This comes to us from WorldNet Daily, the lawyer being quoted to say, "I will be shocked if anything regarding the president is made public." So this comes to us from lawyer John Dowd, who was the head of the president of President Trump's legal team for a certain time in the past. And he's saying that he doesn't think that there's actually going to even be a report. Now that's interesting. That's the first time I've heard that there, after all this activity, for a lawyer to come out and say that there may not even be a report is pretty strange thinking. So his belief is that since there has been no collusion, there was no there at the beginning of this investigation, that they'll wind it up by just letting Mueller kind of drift like a general, a retiring general, and just kind of fade into history. Maybe that would happen with Robert Mueller. I don't think so, but this John Dowd is saying that he thinks that it'll end in a whimper and a fade, and I don't believe that for 1 minute. I absolutely believe there's going to be a lengthy report coming out that's going to be nothing but fiction and speculation with absolutely no connection of dots. And speaking of actual reports, Richard Burr, Republican from North Carolina, the chairman of this committee, the Intelligence Committee, has said that if we write a report based on the facts that we have, then we don't have anything that would suggest there was collusion by the Trump campaign and Russia. Now, of course, that is not going to satisfy the Democrats, because until they find unicorns and Bigfoot, or Nessie in the lock, they are not going to be satisfied. And I think that there's a far greater chance of finding any one of those three creatures than finding anything that they're trying to find with Trump, because you can't find something that doesn't exist. But don't let that stop the Democrats. But we'll see how this goes. Maybe there's another direction, this entire process of ferreting out what happened in the 2016 election. Maybe there's a completely different direction this will go. Let's see. Whoops, here it is. According to Fox News, the FBI scrambled in order to respond to Hillary Clinton's lawyer among Weiner Laptop Review, a newly released email show. So what's this all about? So there was that Weiner laptop was seized by the New York Police Department, was demanded to be turned over to the FBI by the FBI. We believe that maybe the New York police kept a copy of the contents of Weiner's laptop, and that still hasn't been revealed. But nevertheless, then the FBI went into their protect our hero Hillary Clinton mode, and have been doing everything the FBI could do since then in order to squash any kind of a review of Hillary Clinton. And unfortunately, there are newly released FBI internal emails that are showing that the highest ranking officials in the FBI went out of their way to help Hillary Clinton days prior to the 2016 election. And on the same day that then FBI Director Comey sent the bombshell letter to Congress announcing the new review of hundreds of thousands of potentially classified emails found on former Representative Anthony Weiner, who's been sent to prison for sexting with minors. Anyway, his laptop computer, and apparently there is a trove, that used to be treasure trove, and I guess that treasure, they didn't want to include the word treasure in this, so just a trove. So the trove of documents was turned over to the FBI, and the FBI now has turned them over. And oh my, is it possible that the only reason that this is coming out is because there was a FOIA lawsuit filed by Judicial Watch? Freedom of Information Act, the favorite tool of Judicial Watch, apparently is the only reason why all of this is coming to light once again. I'm sure it's starting to be redundant, but it appears we're going to go over the same ground for the 10 millionth time, and that is that there's new information that's going to reveal that Peter Strzok is a weasel, that there was issues between Weasel Kendall, David Kendall, Clinton's lawyer, the other weasels in the FBI, weasels in the DOJ. It's a weasel hunt. So we've got the weasel connection here, and all of this, one way or another, is going to come out. Weasels in the DOJ are then going to start turning on the weasels in the FBI, and here's one of the chief weasels and leaker-in-chief. Can you believe this guy was a director of the FBI? Can you believe that he was actually surprised when he got fired? It's an unbelievable thing. So it goes on and on about what's being uncovered, and we'll see where this goes, and I truly believe that as this whole, up to this point, concealed conspiracy by the true players in this odyssey are revealed. This is the tip of the iceberg. And once again, President Trump is just sitting on those documents, the FISA warrants, the 302 documents, the documents that are kept by FBI agents when they interview a suspect, the ones that was kept by Strzok and then changed months later. A replacement 302 was issued, but never happens because 302 is supposed to be put into stone at the point in time when the interview takes place. But apparently stone is malleable under the old FBI, and so months later that document was, is it redacted? Is it changed? Is it manipulated? Is it redrawn? Who knows? We'll find out. It's all going to come out. So just hang in there. I know it's difficult to be patient, but everything that is hidden will be revealed. And it's not just Fox that's reporting on this. This comes from the conservative treehouse, that when Judicial Watch uncovered the emails between Clinton lawyer David Kendall and FBI lawyer James Baker, that's the one that was at the top of the FBI that was referenced in the Fox News piece on the same day the FBI was forced to reopen the investigation. This lawsuit that's been filed by Judicial Watch is truly going to upset the entire Democrat apple cart. And here is a redacted version of that memo from Lisa Page to a variety of deep state players. Most of them are gone. Most of them are disgraced. Most of them have participated in activity that should land them in jail if there is equal justice under the law. And so you just get the drift that there's a whole lot of blanks on this piece of paper that once they are revealed, the other players, the people, why are there certain players that are redacted out of this piece, and once it's made public exactly what's going on, this whole house of cards is going to collapse. This comes to us from the Washington Free Beacon. So, yesterday I reported on the picket line that's in place in Chicago as teachers have walked out in order to ensure that they get higher wages at a time when governments are collapsing from overwhelming liabilities that they have for their public employees. This piece entitled Union, Indictment Won't Alter Our Political Activity. So, the feds have charged union officials and a Democrat majority leader with 116 counts of corruption. This is in Philadelphia. But that's not going to stop the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, from continuing their arm-twisting ballot. I don't know what they're doing over there. Would it be ballot stuffing? Would it be under-the-handed dealings with local political officials? Who knows what they're doing? They're capable of anything, but these 116 counts of corruption have come down against union officials, but the union comes right back out and says that's not going to keep us from what we're doing. We are proud defenders of the Democrat Party, and come hell or high water, come lawsuits or convictions, come indictments or corruption, we will continue to do our job, which is to subvert the entire country and to ensure that communism... oh, no, that's not what he said. But that's pretty much... you get the drift here, what they're trying to do. And speaking of leftist/communist/Democrat malfeasance, this comes to us from True Pundit. Virginia Governor Ralph Northam, who at one point when this issue was first coming out, and Northam was being accused of wrongdoing, CNN, when they came out with their headline, intentionally put an R in parentheses after his name in order for the initial viewers, as this was breaking, to believe that Governor Ralph Northam was actually a Republican instead of a Democrat. But I digress. So, Northam is saying that he's restoring the voting rights of 10,000 former convicts. So even though there are restrictions on when you are convicted of a felony and sent to prison, under what terms you can ever end up voting again in elections, then I think this is Northam's strategy in order to stay put, is if there ends up with some kind of a recall effort or a referendum or whatever's going on, with the charges coming at him and the request for him to step down, that he's going to fight that off, I guess, by restoring voting rights for felons, I guess in order for them to be immediate supporters of Northam, and maybe that'll boost his favorability in the polls, at least among these typical Democrat voters. So we have 10,000 more Virginians that have been in prison with their civil rights, quote-unquote civil rights. That isn't civil, the voting rights. They had civil rights until some of those rights were restricted based on their bad activity. So we've got, on the one hand, we've got Democrats trying to ensure that we have open borders and we can flood a new wave of criminals into our system. That's portion one of the current Democrat initiative. Portion two, or side two of this, is then to defund immigration and customs enforcement so that they have to release illegal felons into our system. And phase three of this initiative is then taking thousands of people that have already been in the system as convicted felons and giving them their right to vote back. So, boy, are they scared about what's going to happen in 2020? Are they pulling out all the stops to ensure that the Democrat base is bolstered up with drug runners, terrorists, other illegal aliens, convicted felons. They've gone after all the demographics you could go after. They're just still willing to vote for a Democrat. But of course, Northam has said that this is all about giving second chances. I gather it has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that he knows by granting this right, this ability, to 10,000 of these felons, that the vast majority of them are going to be his supporters in the next election. Do you think? And the Washington Examiner brings us this little nugget. After everything that has gone on with the controversy of Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren and her now completely debunked claim that she is a Native American, and in fact on her, when she was getting her law license, whatever that document was that had to be created and submitted, she put on that document that she was American Indian. But since then this has all been blown up, and that she is, as I'm probably more of an American Indian than she is. Pocahontas made a surprise appearance at the Native American Conference. So talk about somebody that just won't give up, that continues to beat a dead horse. Senate Democrat Elizabeth Pocahontas, I call her Prances with Weasels, Warren, made a surprise visit Tuesday to a Native American conference in Washington, D.C. And even though she's had to apologize to the Cherokee Nation, even though the DNA test showed that she is not of Native American roots, she is now continuing to woo those same people that she has disparaged by claiming to be a part of their clan when she is been proven to not be what she claimed she was. So Warren has said she's sorry about the quote-unquote confusion about tribal citizenship. There is no confusion. You are not a Native American. Elizabeth Warren, please listen. Pocahontas, you are not an American Indian. You are not a Native American. You are a white lady from Massachusetts. But don't let that stop her. She's going to continue on. But when you think about it, she's joining the perfect field of Democrat hopefuls. Senator Kamala Harris, and I'm sure during the campaign there were going to be a lot of discussions about her relationship between herself way back when and Willie Brown, who was the overlord of the Democrat Party in California for many decades. And Kirsten Gillibrand, Cory Booker, Amy Klobuchar, now she's thrown her hat in the ring. And I don't know, who's this? Tulsi Gabbard. Why not? Is that the one they call Gabby Gabbard? Got me. It's going to be fun. Trump 2020. And I want to end on this piece from Q Team. And so Q went dark for a while and was asked by one of the QAnon followers that what was going on during that interim when Q had posted last beginning of the month and then has come to life within the last week. And Q indicated that they were still there. They were just waiting for the right time to come public. And Q Team is coming public in a big way. And they are once again trying to remind us of what many of the people who are impatient on the right side of the aisle need to realize. Q Team's post 2697. That reminds us of all of the deep state players, the nefarious demonic minions that have been involved in this entire scenario in the last decades. From Comey to McCabe to Baker to Priestap, all the way down the list, that these people have either been fired, otherwise removed, have had to leave their positions within the Department of Justice and the FBI, cleaning and clearing out those areas so that when William Barr is confirmed later this week and takes over at the helm of the Department of Justice, Rod Rosenstein will be added to this list of former DOJ people. And I think this list will continue to grow. There are still at least 4, according to Q Team, people that need to go out of a list of 8 that were in the batter's box previously. In other words, people on deck that would be the next targets for uncovering what they have done that prompts their dismissal from the DOJ and the FBI. In addition to that, what Q Team is pointing at now, do not forget about Hillary Clinton and her foundation, the crimes against children, and then he puts out again the name of at least 4 more to track and follow, and that nothing being done with a question mark. Sure, there's things being done all the time, and that the fake news can continue is what Q Team is saying. But the light will shine on this darkness. Thank you, Q Team, for your continued updates. We look forward to more. And so thank you for watching the DC Hammer Show, and God bless. And now the DC Hammer Show is available as an audio podcast. Just go to Podcast Garden or iTunes and search for DC Hammer or News Network Analysis Associates, NNAA.